right, welcome back to our daily read aloud. Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH. Yesterday when we left off, we had just met Jonathan Frisby. And who did he start talking to? Which rat? Emma? Nicodemus. All right, so I will start reading right where I left off. Nicodemus. It was a clear but plaintive call, the voice of a mouse. We had almost forgotten the mice were there, and I was startled to hear that one of them knew my name. We all grew quiet. Who's calling me? I asked. My name is Jonathan, said the voice. We have been listening to your talk about going out. We would like to go too, but we cannot open our cages. As you can imagine, this caused a certain consternation. That's kind of like a confusing time. Coming at the last minute. None of us knew much about the mice, except what we had heard Dr. Schultz dictate into his tape recorder. From that, we had learned only that they had been getting the same injections we were getting, and that the treatment had worked about as well on them as on us. They were a sort of side experiment without a control group. Justin was studying the cabinet. Why not, he said, if we can get the doors open. Someone muttered, they'll slow us down. No, said the mouse Jonathan, we will not. Only open our cages when you go, and we will make our own way. We won't even stay with you if you prefer. How many are you? I asked. Only 8. And the cabinet doors are easy to open. There's just a simple hook halfway up. But Justin and Arthur had already figured that out. They climbed up the screen, unhooked the hook, and the doors swung open. The cages open the same way as yours, said another mouse, but we can't reach far enough to unlatch them. All right, I said. Tomorrow night, as soon as Dr. Schultz and the others leave, we'll open your cages, and you can follow the thread with us to get out. After that, you're on your own. Agreed, said Jonathan, and thank you. And now, I said, we should all get back to the cages. Justin, please hook the doors again. I latched myself into my cage and was getting ready for sleep when I heard a scratching noise on the door, and there was Jenner climbing down from above. Nicodemus, he said, can I come in? Of course, but it's getting on toward morning. I won't stay long. He unlatched the door and entered. There's something we've got to decide. I know, I said. I've been thinking about it too. When we do get out, where are we going to go? It's a pretty good question. Why do you think they're wondering where they should go? Why would it be hard for them to go back where they came from? What do you think they're thinking about, Zoe?
How they can get back to their family and how they will know where they woke up.
Yeah, they drove in a truck a long ways, right? So they don't know how to get back or even where they are. Noah?
And one more thing, if they did go back there, they wouldn't know anybody because they've been there so long. Everyone else would have died and had kids, and they would have thought they were strangers.
Yep. Remember, they've lived so long, all the rats in the control group at this point have died, right? Even those in Group B have already died. So let's find out what they're thinking. I could not see Jenner's face in the dark of the cage, but I knew from his voice that he was worrying. I said, at first I thought home, of course, but then, when I began remembering, I realized that won't work. We could find the way, I suppose, now that we can read, but if we did, what then? We wouldn't find anyone we know. So, good prediction, Noah. And yet, Jenner said, you know that's not the real point. No. The real point is this. We don't know where to go because we don't know what we are. Do you want to go back to living in a sewer pipe and eating other people's garbage? Because that's what rats do. But the fact is, we aren't rats anymore. We're something Dr. Schultz has made, something new. Dr. Schultz says our intelligence has increased more than 1,000%. I suspect he's underestimated. I think we're probably as intelligent as he is, maybe more. We can read, and with a little practice, we'll be able to write, too. I mean to do both. I think we can learn to do anything we want. But where do we do it? Where does a group of civilized rats fit in? I don't know, I said. We're going to have to find out. It won't be easy, but even so, the first step must be to get out of here. We're lucky to have a chance, but it won't last. We're a jump ahead of Dr. Schultz. If he knew what we know, he wouldn't leave us alone in here another night, and he's sure to find out soon. Another thing to worry about, Jenner said, if we do get away, when he finds we're gone, won't he figure out how we did it? And won't he realize that we must have learned to read? Probably. And then what? What will happen when he announces that there's a group of civilized rats roaming loose, rats that can read and think and figure things out? I said, let's wait until we're free before we worry about that. But Jenner was right. It was a thing to worry about, and maybe it still is. The next day was terrible. I kept expecting to hear Dr. Schultz say, "Who took my screwdriver?" And then to hear Julie add, "My thread is missing too." That could have happened and set them to thinking, but it didn't. And that night, an hour after Julie, George, and Dr. Schultz left the laboratory, we were out on our cages and gathered, the whole group of us, before the mouse cabinet. Justin opened its doors, unlatched their cages, and the mice came out. They looked very small and frightened, but one strode bravely forward. "Are you Nicodemus?" he said to me. "I'm Jonathan. Thank you for taking us out with you." "We're not out yet," I said, "but you're welcome." We had no time for chatting. The light coming in the windows was turning gray. In less than an hour, it would be dark, and we would need light to figure out how to open the screen at the end of the shaft. We went to the opening in the baseboard. "Justin," I said, "take the lead. Roll up the thread as you go. I'll bring up the rear. No noise. There's sure to be somebody awake somewhere in the building. We don't want them to hear us." I did not want to leave the thread where it might be found. The more I thought about it, the more I felt sure Dr. Schultz would try to track us down, for quite a few reasons. Justin lifted the grid, pushed open the sliding panel, and one by one we went through. As I watched the others go ahead of me, I noticed for the first time that one of the mice was white. Who do we think that might be? Angie? You think of his name? The doctor, Mr. Aegis. One of the mice was white. Then I went in myself, closing the grid behind me and pushing the panel half shut again, its normal position. With Justin leading the way, we moved through the dark passage quickly and easily. In only 15 or 20 minutes, we had reached the end of the thread. Then, just as Justin had told us it would, the shaft widened. We could hear the whir of the machine ahead, and almost immediately, we saw a square of gray daylight. We had reached the end of the shaft, and there, a terrible thing happened. Justin, you will recall, had told us that the machine, the pump that pulled air through the shaft, had switched from low speed to high when he had first explored through there. So we were forewarned. The trouble was, the forewarning was no use at all, not so far as the mice were concerned. We were approaching the lightened square of the opening when the roar began. The blast of air came like a sudden whistling gale. It took my breath and flattened my ears against my head. And I closed my eyes instinctively. I was still in the rear, and when I opened my eyes again, I saw one of the mice sliding past me, clawing uselessly with his small nails at the smooth metal beneath him. Another followed him, and still another, as one by one they were blown backward into the dark maze of tunnels we had just left. I braced myself in the corner of the shaft and grabbed at one as he slid by. It was the white mouse. I caught him by one leg, pulled him around behind me, and held on. Another blew face on into the rat ahead of me and stopped there. It was Jonathan, who had been near the lead. But the rest were lost. 6 in all. They were simply too light. They blew away like dead leaves. And we never saw them again. In another minute, the roar stopped. The rush of air slowed from a gale to a breeze, and we were able to go forward again. I said to the white mouse, "You'd better hold on to me. That might happen again." He looked at me in dismay. "But what about the others? 6 are lost. We've got to go back and look for them." Jonathan quickly joined him. "I'll go with you." "No," I said. "That would be useless and foolish." All right, what do you guys think that would be a waste of time? Josiah?
Because they get lost too.
Yeah. And are they heavy enough to stay where they're at if the wind comes back? No. No, that would be useless and foolish. You have no idea which shaft they were blown into, nor even if they all went the same way. And if you should find them, how would you find your way out again? And suppose the wind comes again. Then there would be 8 lost instead of 6. The wind did come again, 6 times more, while we worked with the screwdriver to pry open the screen. Each time we had to stop work and hang on. The 2 mice clung to the screen itself. Some of us braced ourselves behind them in case they should slip. And Justin, taking the thread with him as a guideline, went back to search for the other 6. He explored shaft after shaft to the end of the spool, calling softly as he went. But it was futile. That means no use. To this day, we don't know what became of those 6 mice. They may have found their way out eventually, or they may have died in there. We left an opening in the screen for them just in case. The screen. It was heavy wire, with holes about the size of an acorn, and it was set in a steel frame. We pried and hammered at it with the screwdriver, but we could not move it. It was fastened on the outside. We couldn't see how. Finally, the white mouse had an idea. Push the screwdriver through the wire near the bottom, he said, and pry up, like a lever. We did, and the wire bent a fraction of an inch. We did it again, prying down, then left, then right. The hole in the wire grew slowly bigger, until the white mouse said, "I think that's enough." He climbed to the small opening, and by squirming and twisting, he got through. Justin followed him. They both fell out of sight, but in a minute, Jonathan's head came back in view on the outside. "It's a sliding bolt," he said. "We're working on it." Inside, we could hear the faint rasping as the 2 mice tugged on the bolt handle, working it back. Then the crack at the base of the screen widened. We pushed it open, and we were standing on the roof of NIMH, free. You want to read a little bit more? I think we got time for a little bit more. Okay, this chapter is called The Boniface Estate. Alex?
How's that moving?
Huh?
How's that moving?
Oh, just probably wind. Okay.
Let's see.
Mrs. Frisby said. So we're back. Remember, Nicodemus is telling her this whole story. Mrs. Frisby said, "Jonathan and Mr. Aegis got the screen open." "Yes," Nicodemus said. "And without them, I doubt that we could have done it. The steel frame was strong, the bolt was secure, and the wire so stiff, we could not have bent it for one of us to go through. So we were glad they were with us and asked them if they would, after all, like to stay with us. Since there were only 2 of them, they said they would, for the time being at least." And now began a journey that was to last, with some interruptions, for almost 2 years. Parts of it were pleasant. It was a joyful feeling at first, just to be free again and to get those laboratory collars off. And parts of it were terrible. I have made notes about all of it, and if the time ever comes when rats publish books of their own, I intend to write a book about it. It would be a long book, full of trouble and danger. Too much to tell now. But it was in one of the dangerous times that I lost my eye and got the scar you see on my face. We did have some happy times, and some pieces of great good luck, 2 in particular, that helped to explain how we got here and what our plans are now. It was early summer when we got out. We had known that beforehand. We could tell by the lateness of the light through the windows, though it was dark when we finally stood on the roof. We had no trouble getting down the side of the building, however. There were downspouts in the corners with plenty of toe holds. We dropped the screwdriver and spool of thread into one of those. A little lower there was ivy. We were all good climbers, and there was moonlight to see by. In less than 15 minutes, we were on the ground. Staying in the darkest shadows under the bushes when we could, we sped away from NIMH, not knowing or caring at first what direction we were going. Nobody saw us. During the first few weeks, we lived as we could. We had, in a way, to learn all over again how to get along. For although the world outside the laboratory was the same, we ourselves were different. We were, a couple of times, reduced to eating from dumps and garbage cans. But knowing how to read, we quickly learned to recognize signs on buildings. Groceries, supermarket, meats and vegetables, for instance, let us know that there was food inside for the taking. And once inside a supermarket at night, they always leave a few lights on, we could even read the signs on the wall directing us to Section 8 for dairy products, cheese, Section 3 for baked goods, and so on. In the country, there were barns and silos stocked with grain and corn and chicken houses full of eggs. Occasionally, we came upon other rats, and a few times we talked with them, but not for long. Because just after a few words, they would begin to look at us strangely and edge away. Somehow, they could tell that we were different. I think we even looked different. Either the diet or the injections at NIMH had made us bigger and stronger than other rats. And all the strange rats we saw looked, to us, surprisingly weak and puny. We were set apart from even our own kind. It was while we were in the country that we had our first important stroke of luck. We had just about decided, after nearly 4 months of freedom and constant roving, to find a place to settle down, if not permanently, at least for the winter. We thought that it should be in the country, but not too far from a town, so that we would have access to grocery stores as well as barns and gardens. And I think that's where we're going to stop today. All right, so they're out. They're trying to find a place to live. Any predictions where they might try to settle? Cadence?
They're gonna make a house for 5 years.
Okay.
That's how they live in that library.
Okay. Eric?
They found the barn that they had, and then they stole some stuff, and then they went and then they made a burrow there because there was food there, so they could eat like the supermarket.
Okay. So you think that where they end up first is on the farm where they're at now?
Well, they just run and keep running until they find a good spot.
Okay. Angie?
They're gonna make a home in that rose bush.
Okay, you think they're going straight to the rose bush? All right, we'll find out. All right. I will see you all later. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you after break.